Making a movie is never easy, but sometimes it gets pretty weird, unusually weird. These are some bizarre things that happened on the sets of some of your favorite films.
The Wizard of Oz is a classic, and one that doesn't get any less nightmarish with age. Since the movie was filmed way before concepts like workplace safety and sobriety were invented, a lot of strange things went on during filming. The original cast list featured Buddy Ebsen as the Scarecrow and Ray Bolger as the Tin Man, but that's obviously not how things turned out. The story goes that Bolger wanted to be the Scarecrow since he was a dancer and didn't want to be trapped inside a tin suit. He went to MGM honcho Mervyn LeRoy and said he'd been cast in the wrong role. They allowed Ebsen and Bolger to swap roles, and some of the movie was even filmed before Ebsen was sent to the hospital with a major allergic reaction to the aluminum dust that he was painted with. According to Ebsen, no one believed he was sick, and he was ordered back to the set. That is until, thankfully, medical personnel got involved. Ebsen would go on to complain of breathing problems for the rest of his life, and he didn't even get to be in the movie. Jack Haley was hired, and the studio switched to using aluminum paste rather than dust, and that quickly gave Haley a severe eye infection, so filming was delayed again. Actor Frank Morgan played 5 different roles in Oz: Professor Marvel, the crying gatekeeper, the driver behind the horse of a different color, the wizard's guard, and the Wizard of Oz himself. But it wasn't just acting chops that got him through such an arduous schedule. The first day Morgan showed up on set, he had a briefcase, but carrying things like papers and scripts was for amateurs. His briefcase had a minibar in it. Ray Bolger, who played the Scarecrow, said, "No matter how many times he retreated to the black briefcase, he was never less than a gentleman. Although, when he tried to stop drinking, he was often short-tempered and irritable." According to his wardrobe man, Morgan's drink of choice was champagne, and there was at least one incident where director Victor Fleming confronted Morgan and told him to drink more so he was tolerable on set.
Jiminy Cricket.
Ah, the good old days. If you always thought that the Cowardly Lion's costume looked incredibly realistic, that's because, well, it was made from real lions. The idea had been to make a couple of costumes so actor Burt Lahr would be able to swap them out during filming, but the unique patterns of the real lion hides made that impossible since every costume would look different. Lahr ended up with one single costume that weighed about 60 pounds, which quickly filled with sweat under the hot studio lights. It became such a problem that the filmmakers needed to make a special purchase, an industrial drying bin to help get the costume a little less wet for the next day. Not included, Febreze. Margaret Hamilton, who played the Wicked Witch, was the type to suffer for her craft. And while there were a whole bunch of accidents during filming that would have today's stars calling their lawyers, her on-set mishap ranks right at the top. The first take of the witch leaving Munchkinland went perfectly, but director Victor Fleming wanted another take just in case. During take 2, Hamilton's hat and coat caught on fire, burning layers of skin off her face and hands. That's pretty bad, right? Well, it gets worse. The only way to get the green paint off of her burned skin was with alcohol. She left the set for 6 weeks and returned before she had completely healed. Since they couldn't reapply the green paint, she wore gloves for the rest of the filming. Not surprisingly, she had lost a bit of faith in the special effects department and refused to do any more fire-related scenes. They still had that famous skywriting sequence to film, and that required an actress who was willing to sit on a prop broomstick that spewed smoke. Long story short, it was a pipe, it was filled with fire, and it exploded. Hamilton's stunt double Betty Danko was hospitalized for 11 days. Presumably, she never worked with fire again either. We didn't always know what we were doing when it came to science and human bodies, which is why pure uncut asbestos was used in just about everything, including the scene in The Wizard of Oz where Dorothy's gang falls asleep in the field and snow begins to fall. Obviously, that's not snow that's falling on them, but the choice of asbestos was perhaps short-sighted. The film stars were all covered with asbestos fibers, and at the time, it wasn't that odd. Asbestos was often used to simulate fake snow, even in department stores. Do you know what else contained asbestos? Everything that needed to be fireproofed, including the Wicked Witch's broom and part of the Scarecrow's costume. That's right. Ray Bolger was dancing around in asbestos, under falling asbestos, not even knowing he was giving cancer the big ol' middle finger, until his death from cancer in 1987. By the end of filming, MGM decided that The Wizard of Oz was about 20 minutes too long. The first thing that got the axe was a scene that had taken an entire 5 weeks to film and cost a mind-blowing $80,000, or $1.4 million in today's money. The premise was pretty simple. The Wicked Witch sends a swarm of bugs, which were known for giving their victims the jitters, to distract Dorothy's group while her henchmen swooped in. But really, it played like an excuse to do a contemporary dance number in the middle of the haunted forest. There was more to the whole jitterbug plot, but with bits and pieces of the story falling off the original script, only one portion of it remained in the final film. Too bad it made no sense without the whole dancing scene.
They'll give you no trouble, I promise you that. I've sent a little insect on ahead to take the fight out of them.
The whole out-of-place reference to a modern dance fad was way too odd to keep, and that's saying something for a movie that starred a robot and a living bunch of hay.
The Harry Potter films had some pretty strange things happen during shoots, from vandalism to actor accidents to hilarious hijinks that Fred and George Weasley would definitely approve of. The Hogwarts Express was the site of not one but two cases of property destruction during the shoots. In 2003, a group of youths made good on that Marauders map pledge to be up to no good and spray painted one of the train cars with silver and green symbols while it was stationed at a depot in Scarborough. As if that wasn't bad enough, in 2007, another set of vandals smashed several windows with the train's emergency hammers, and the boys responsible, who were between 12 and 14 at the time, were arrested for causing such expensive damage to the vehicle. On the set of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, personal tragedy struck young star Emma Watson, who played Hermione Granger in the film. Her pet hamster Millie died of a heart attack during filming, and since Watson was only 11 years old at the time, it was a devastating day for her indeed. The film's set department conjured up an idea for how to make her feel better about it though, and made Watson's lost little pal her own tiny mahogany casket with velvet lining and a silver plaque bearing her name.
Rest in peace, Millie. This one's for you.
Water scenes in movies are notoriously difficult to pull off, so it's probably no surprise that the scene where the young competitors in the Tri-Wizard tournament were made to fish out their friends from the depths of the sea became problematic. Daniel Radcliffe, who played Harry, got his signals crossed when he was filming the diving scene in a water tank, and instead of using the gesture that meant A-OK, he accidentally alerted his scuba trainers that he was running out of air and needed to be brought to the surface. It was a relatively harmless snafu in the end, of course, but it's a good thing he didn't make the wrong sign at a time of need. While Radcliffe's close call was a false alarm, there was a gruesome accident on the set of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows in 2009 that left Radcliffe's stunt double David Holmes permanently paralyzed. The 25-year-old former gymnast was filming a flying scene that required him to be yanked backward during a controlled explosion. Something went wrong and he was thrown to the ground. As a result, Holmes, who had been Radcliffe's stunt double since the first movie, suffered a broken neck and is still in a wheelchair. Despite this tragedy, Holmes has maintained his relationship with some of the Potter cast members, especially Radcliffe and Tom Felton, who played Draco Malfoy. He's also an official ambassador for the Royal National Orthopedic Hospital Peel, where he did his strenuous recovery after the accident. Holmes's devastating injury wasn't the only set accident to occur on Deathly Hallows. Due to a pyrotechnic special effect failure, a fire broke out during the Hogwarts battle scene, catching the actual set on fire. None of the main cast was present, but 100 crew members were there, and it took 40 minutes to put the fire out. Luckily, the castle that burned was a mocked-up version. In fact, no major damage was caused to the main set, and the fire was out by the time the fire department got there. Though tabloids exaggerated the incident, Warner Brothers representatives said the set was going to be rebuilt anyway for Deathly Hallows Part 2. Even so, sources joke that the crew was forced to write, "I must not burn down Hogwarts," using the blood quill.
Mischief managed.
During the filming of Sorcerer's Stone, one actor's performance was so hilarious that the kids on the set couldn't stop giggling, which was a problem in keeping to the production schedule. Peeves, the Poltergeist of Hogwarts, was a staple throughout the books, and Rick Mayall was cast for the part. Problem was, he had the kids in stitches so much that he was even asked to do his lines with his back to the kids, and even then they still couldn't stop laughing at him. It wasn't the incessant chuckling that got the character axed from the theatrical cut, though. Director Chris Columbus didn't like the way it looked on screen and left his scenes on the editing room floor, much to the chagrin of Mayall. Mayall later said that he didn't have the heart to tell his own children he'd been cut, so when they went to see the film, they came home and said, "Bloody good makeup, Dad," thinking that it was him who played Hagrid in the movie. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban director Alfonso Cuarón forced the main actors to write essays about the characters they've been playing for years. As the story goes, Radcliffe wrote 1 page, Watson wrote 16, and Rupert Grint pulled a classic Ronald Weasley move and just didn't turn his in. Cuarón claimed this exercise was a way to immerse the actors in their own emotions and experiences while digging deeper into the characters they play, and he said their essays were really beautiful, very honest, very bare, and very courageous. In the scene from Prisoner of Azkaban where Hermione calls Draco Malfoy a foul, loathsome, evil little cockroach, she was supposed to just slap him, according to Tom Felton. But apparently, Watson got carried away and punched her co-star instead. Felton says she has a mean hook and that he walked away from the incident with his tail tucked between his legs and his hearing sort of impaired.
I feel terrible. I feel really bad. I'm not really sure what I was thinking.
Let's relive that moment once again, shall we? Chances are, he won't be calling anyone a mudblood in real life anytime soon with the memory of that hit in mind.
A Hollywood blockbuster represents thousands of hours of work, which means that no matter how great the finished product, some pretty interesting stuff happens behind the scenes of most films that we, the public, never get to hear about. Here's a look at the filming of the Matrix franchise and some of the crazy things that happened when the cameras weren't rolling. Matrix star Keanu Reeves had to read 1,000 pages worth of philosophy and evolutionary psychology before he was even allowed to see the complete script for the film. But everyone in the cast had a homework assignment to read a dense book of French postmodern philosophy called Simulacra and Simulation by Jean Baudrillard. That's because the film's directors, the Wachowskis, wanted to be sure that everyone in the movie really understood the concept behind the Matrix and could explain it when asked, unlike Morpheus, who clearly didn't do the reading.
Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself.
The Matrix special effects team studied everything from the physics of fluid dynamics to the exploding patterns of different types of glass in order to create this awe-inspiring helicopter crash. But the whole thing almost didn't happen. Just researching the scene took so much time, money, and work that Warner Brothers tried to have it cut from the movie entirely. Fortunately, the Wachowskis' passion won out and the helicopter crash stayed in, using just about every kind of special effect available at the time. Before they blew your mind with this breakout sci-fi hit, directing duo the Wachowskis had only one other successful film to their name, the lesbian crime drama Bound. So, to convince Warner Brothers to fund The Matrix, they got comic artists Jeff Darrow and Steve Skroce to turn the script into a shot-for-shot storyboard of the entire film. The 600-page storyboard was impressive enough to get the studio to take the red pill, giving the Wachowskis a $60 million budget to make their vision a reality. Warner Brothers' only stipulation? That they got to pick the film's star, though their choice of Keanu Reeves wasn't initially a big hit with the Wachowskis. Turns out they just didn't know Reeves had a skill set that went way beyond what they'd seen in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
I know Kung Fu.
If you noticed that every scene set inside the Matrix simulation is kind of green and queasy looking, you're not imagining things. It was a visual trick used by the filmmakers to give the world a sterile, artificial feel. Which, sure, they could have accomplished with a filter in post-production, but costume designer Kim Barrett went the extra mile and put every light-colored piece of clothing worn by the cast through a green wash that also goes extra nicely with the color scheme in the Oracle's kitchen. For Neo, this training simulation was designed to teach him to keep an eye out for the movie's evil agents. But if you take Morpheus's advice,
Look again.
You'll notice something weird. Some of the people in this crowd look exactly alike. For the filmmakers, it was a subtle hint that whoever made this simulation took shortcuts, copying and pasting the same code multiple different times. But for casting director Tim Little, it was a challenge, because he was the one who had to scour the entire country of Australia for dozens of pale-skinned twins and triplets to use in the scene. That wasn't the best part of the job, however. Little actually had the most fun visiting local fetish clubs to find extras who would be comfortable in some of the film's more extreme costume options. Back in the day, the sets constructed for The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions were among the most ambitious ever built, like the 1.5-mile stretch of fake highway that was built from scratch for this chase scene. But it didn't go to waste. 97.5% of the materials used in the final two Matrix movies were either recycled or repurposed to build low-income housing in Mexico, which means that someone is probably sitting in a living room right now where the very walls are imbued with molecules of Keanu Reeves' kung fu sweat. Despite what you may have heard, Keanu Reeves didn't donate his entire salary to the movie's special effects crew, but he did sign away his residual payments forever in order to funnel money back into the trilogy's production. Nobody knows exactly how much money Reeves passed up in order to give the crew another 2 movies worth of job security, but it would have been in the millions. We'll give you a second to let that sink in.
He is the one.
Poltergeist was one of the most storied productions in Hollywood history. In fact, it's often called the most cursed film set of all time because of what happened to so many of its stars after the movie hit theaters.
They're here.
Perhaps the most enduringly buzzy aspect of the Poltergeist movie legend is that so many of its cast members, including 2 of the child stars, died unexpectedly after the film was released. The first instance happened when Dominique Dunne, who portrayed Dana in the original film, was strangled to death by her ex-boyfriend in the driveway of her home in 1982, at the age of just 22. Then, in 1988, Child star Heather O'Rourke died at the age of 12 from cardiac arrest after experiencing septic shock from a congenital bowel obstruction. She completed filming on the third installment of the Poltergeist franchise a few months before her unexpected death, but the film had yet to be released at the time. Although other cast members would later perish from more natural causes, the expiration of the film's two young actresses caused many to speculate that their involvement with the supernatural movie had something to do with their untimely demises. Before Dunn and O'Rourke's deaths, there was another eerie incident which nearly claimed the life of one of the Freeling children off-screen. Actor Oliver Robbins, who portrayed the middle child Robbie, was actually strangled by the very animatronic clown that tormented his character so in the film. If it weren't for the intervention of producer Steven Spielberg, he's not sure what would have happened to him. Nothing good, probably. As Robbins recalled, the way they shot the sequence, they didn't really have the special effects the way they do today. So the clown doll had this extended arm, and they had me act backwards. The contraption caught around my neck. Steven saw that, probably in the video assist deck, and he pulled me away from it. Who knows what might have happened otherwise? It was very fast. Maybe I wouldn't be here today. As if that demonic clown wasn't already scary enough. Actress Jo Beth Williams experienced a series of frights in her temporary home during production on the first installment as well. Williams revealed during her Reddit AMA that the picture on her apartment wall kept shifting while she left to shoot the movie, but she later decided it was her own fault for slamming the front door. Meanwhile, author James Caan, who was writing the novelization of the movie, also experienced a case of the heebie-jeebies at home. A lightning bolt struck his building as he was finishing up the project and blew the facing of his air conditioning unit across the room, which struck him in the back. After that, the lights came back on and his video games started playing themselves. Poltergeist 2 star Will Sampson, who was a real-life shaman and portrayed Taylor the Medicine Man in the sequel, performed an actual exorcism on the set of the film to rid the site of alien spirits. He died a little over a year after the film's release from complications associated with a heart and lung transplant. And during filming of Poltergeist 3, actress Zelda Rubinstein was troubled by a photographic light blur that occurred during a photo session of the actress, leading her to believe that the pic was taken at the exact moment her mother passed away. The production of Part 3 was also an explosive one, as a garage that was to be used for filming caught fire after plastic fake ice poured onto prop cars ignited into flames and injured 3 crew members. A fire chief responding to the scene told the Los Angeles Times, "A ball of fire chased everyone out there. There was black smoke all over the place. This was all supposed to be done with the best of taste, but somehow it got away." The cause of the mishap, he said, was unexplained, since the crew on set were amply prepared to pull off the shot correctly when they began working that night.
I know, but there are many dangers you must consider, Stephen.
When Star Wars was first released in 1977, it quickly became one of the most iconic films of all time, spawning a franchise of unrelenting popularity. However, behind the scenes, so much overall weirdness occurred during filming, you'd think there was some kind of curse at play. In 1976, filming for A New Hope began in Tunisia. On the second day of filming, heavy rain prevented any work from being done. The first winter rain to fall in that region of Tunisia in 50 years. Sandstorms destroyed both film equipment and sets. On top of that, there were droid problems. R2-D2's suit was constantly breaking down in the heat, and it would take entire days of filming just to get a few seconds of him rolling a few feet. When Anthony Daniels took his first steps in his C-3PO costume, according to People, the left leg piece shattered and injured his foot.
It looks like you boys have seen a lot of action.
Go ahead and make the Han and Leia connection, because Carrie Fisher already did. She confirmed in her book The Princess Diarist, it was Han and Leia during the week and Carrie and Harrison during the weekend. She was 19 years old at the time, Ford was 33, and married with 2 kids. Fisher said the 3-month affair was intense, but don't take her word for it. In the book, she claimed she couldn't recall much of the relationship due to the brutal strength of Harrison's preferred strain of pot. Well, at least now we know what Han Solo was smuggling. Ford had precious little to say about the fling.
No, I can literally remember 3 times that I, of course, made some oblique reference to it, and he went,
Like A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back encountered historic weather problems when it began filming in Norway in 1979. While blizzards were perfect for the snow planet of Hoth, the sub-zero temperature was less than ideal for the cast and crew. In what ended up being one of Northern Europe's most severe winters in history, it was often too cold to even use any filming equipment outdoors. So, what did the crew do? They shot most scenes just steps away from their hotel. When it came time for Harrison Ford to shoot his scenes, multiple avalanches prevented him from traveling by train. He ended up having to ride a snowplow to set. It's a shame he didn't film his road trip for the outtakes. During the filming of The Empire Strikes Back, it was nothing but revelry on set. While shooting in London, Carrie Fisher rented Monty Python trooper Eric Idle's home. One night during a party with the Rolling Stones, Idol made Fisher and Harrison Ford a special drink.
They called a Tunisian death drink, which they then shared with Harrison and myself.
Fisher recalled to the Daily Beast, "We were still drunk when we arrived in Cloud City the next day. We don't really smile a lot in the movie, but there, we're smiling." Fisher also admitted to doing cocaine on the set. So, there you have it. In the era of Dare, your childhood heroes were doing blow with the Mick Jagger. Star Wars enthusiasts know that Frank Oz, the legendary Muppeteer, played Yoda in The Empire Strikes Back. However, to successfully manipulate the Yoda puppet on the Dagobah set, Oz endured painful circumstances unlike anything you could think of. Weighing 175 pounds and standing at 6'2", Oz had to cram himself into a small bunker to keep out of sight while working. Even more difficult was that the oil used to create the murky atmosphere gave Oz such bad nausea, he reportedly had to wear a gas mask. While inside his bunker, Oz could neither hear nor see what was going on above him, so a TV monitor and radio earphones were installed to help him follow the action. It took around 4 hours of work to capture just 2 lines of dialogue.
Do or do not. There is no try.
During one especially difficult workday, the iconic puppet Miss Piggy showed up in the middle of what was supposed to be an extremely serious moment between Yoda and Luke. It was a nice moment of levity, considering that Oz referred to his time on Dagobah as one of the hardest things I've ever done in 20 years of performing. To perfectly capture the forest moon of Endor in Return of the Jedi, the crew filmed in the vast forest of the Northern California town of Crescent City. Soon, a rumor began to spread that Peter Mayhew, the actor who played Chewbacca, had to be accompanied by a group of crew members wearing brightly colored outfits for fear that he might be mistaken for the legendary Bigfoot and shot by hunters. As silly as this whole story sounds, the forests of the Pacific Northwest have been infamous for Bigfoot sightings, so it was a very real concern. For over 30 years, this story was just an outrageous rumor, until Reddit users asked Peter Mayhew, who was kind enough to confirm the rumor as fact. The trouble with those wacky Ewoks in Return of the Jedi began with their costumes. The designers tried, but were unable to make the costumes' eyelids and mouths move. This gave the Ewoks sort of a wooden appearance, making them equal parts cuddly and nightmare-inducing. The actors also frequently overheated in their costumes, with one telling People in 1983, "The costumes were like saunas. The wardrobe people were constantly bringing us Gatorade." The actors created some memorable stories from their behind-the-scenes trysts as well. J.W. Rensler, who wrote The Making of Return of the Jedi, said that the Ewok performers often used their dressing rooms for secret lovemaking. A few people had funny stories about having to knock on any doors that contained private places. So now you know. The Ewok actors were getting steamy both in and out of their costumes. It's probably safe to say that half the viewing audience thought the Porgs were the most adorable things ever, and the other half thought they were Tribbles crossed with Ewoks. But the Porgs didn't exist just because Rian Johnson thought they would be super cute and kids would love them. They mostly existed because of the logistical and ethical problems associated with booting puffins out of their nests. Luke Skywalker scenes were shot on the Irish island of Skellig Michael, a World Heritage Site where thousands of puffins raise their chicks every year. The puffins are only in residence during the summer, which just so happened to coincide with the production schedule for The Last Jedi. For ethical reasons, producers thought it would be best to leave the birds alone and just CGI them into porgs, as well as create entirely CGI porgs to interact with a very hungry Chewbacca. The Crystal Foxes of Crate were a CGI and animatronic marvel, one that made every kid in America temporarily forget all about porgs. According to Entertainment Weekly, creature designers got their inspiration from crystal chandeliers, but these are crystal chandeliers that move gracefully like foxes. So how could special effects bring these bizarre and beautiful creatures to life? They tried using a real dog actor, but director Rian Johnson says that was a disaster. At one point, we tried putting a crystal suit on a dog, and that just did not work at all. It was a noble attempt, and it was kind of cool, but it just kind of looked like a suit on a dog. And speaking of dogs, Carrie Fisher's French bulldog, Gary Fisher, accompanied his best friend everywhere, even on the set of The Last Jedi. According to Vulture, the dog was such a constant presence on the set that Rian Johnson decided to give him a cameo. He appears in the Canto Bight casino just behind Rose and Finn, looking a bit more like a miniature walrus than like a French bulldog. Though, to be fair, French bulldogs do kind of already look like miniature walruses, so the CGI people really didn't have to do a whole lot. From masked menaces at the center of psychological thrillers to sinister sociopathic slasher icons, let's take a look at some of the creepiest things that went down on the sets of serial killer movies. 1974's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre changed the face of both horror and independent film. Its pseudo-documentarian narration, over-the-top brutality, and completely fabricated based on a true story claim cemented its place in the pantheon of great horror cinema. One of the film's most intense and nearly unwatchable sequences is the dinner scene. What makes it so brutal? Well, during filming, even the actors themselves were beginning to lose touch with reality. Bad news for a movie with a dude swinging around a real-life chainsaw. The scene took over a day to shoot, the set was unbearably hot, and the actors had to take Dramamine breaks to get over the smell of rancid meat. Leatherface even accidentally sliced actress Marilyn Burns' finger open on camera after a prop busted. We say Leatherface rather than actor Gunnar Hansen because at this point, the 6'4" man beneath the mask thought he was actually there to take out Burns. Yup. The screams, the deranged laughter, and the terror of that scene were as close to real as it gets. David Fincher is a notoriously difficult director to work with. While filming 2007's critically acclaimed Zodiac, he pushed his actors to new extremes, averaging a mind-boggling 70 takes per scene. With all that footage to work with, he then got sadistic delight out of torturing actors like Jake Gyllenhaal by deleting hours of said takes right in front of him, just to see if he could make him cry over it. But Gyllenhaal wasn't the only subject of Fincher's torment. The director himself reported that Robert Downey Jr. reached such extreme levels of passive aggressiveness that he left jars of his own urine around the set in protest. We're, not quite sure about the cause-effect logic of that reaction, but one thing's for sure, we don't want to tick off Robert Downey Jr. enough to find out. One of the quintessential slasher films, 1978's Halloween, is unique in that the villain is basically a blank slate. He's not supernatural, he never says a word, and his backstory doesn't reveal much of anything as far as motivation. He's just an extremely broken person in a bleached-out William Shatner mask getting a stab on. It's part of the horror. You can't reason with him or outthink him. You just have to keep running. Meanwhile, he lumbers just behind with his distinctive gait. That gait of his arrived purely by chance. Nick Castle was a friend of director John Carpenter and found himself just sort of hanging around on set watching his friend work. When it came time to start filming scenes with the iconic villain, Carpenter told Castle to slap on the mask and get in there because apparently he had the perfect walk. Castle seems to have a pretty good sense of humor about the whole thing, considering his close friend pretty much told him he walks like a movie monster. Examining it in context, American Psycho is a very strange product of a very strange time. Based on Bret Easton Ellis's novel of the same name, and filmed by feminist director Mary Herron, it pulled genuine humor out of the macabre social commentary of its source material while retaining a tasteful amount of gore. But Christian Bale's incredible performance as the charmingly dead-eyed Patrick Bateman is what really sealed the deal. A decent portion of the film sees Bateman hiring bored prostitutes, who begrudgingly render their services before meeting untimely ends. To prepare for these scenes, Bale and Herron watched a lot of adult entertainment together. That sort of employee-manager relationship should have led to a series of HR complaints, but on the American Psycho set, it merely added to the absurdity of the final product. While Seven is known for its grisly crime scenes, it's also recognized for its production mishaps. While filming a chase scene, Brad Pitt slipped on the hood of a car and smashed his arm through its windshield. Rather than call it a day, Fincher wrote the injury into the movie, and Pitt wore his actual cast throughout the filming, keeping it off-screen in scenes that precede the injury. And then there's actor Gene Borkin, who played the corpse Greed. Apparently, Borkin didn't realize he would have to be naked in his scene. Right there, on set, he renegotiated his pay and still convinced them to at least let him wear underwear. Heidi Shantz, who played Pride, found herself pretty amused by how much Fincher seemed to enjoy dousing her with fake blood. She remarked as much, and Fincher, deadpan, replied, "I have demons you can't even imagine." Damn, Fincher, you're kinda creepy.